Hello, and thank you for joining us for this Satori Software webinar, Putting Data to Work for Your Retail Business. Before we get started, I'd like to cover just a couple of very quick housekeeping items. First off, if you participate in social media, and it's interesting because both Kim and Liz are nodding their heads here, so I think they're active users. We'll talk a little more about that later, but if you do use social media, and I think pretty much everybody does these days, you can find Satori on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. We're everywhere these days. And again, questions and answers here. We can certainly ask Liz about that strategy in that space. This webinar is being recorded. So in the event that you need to drop off or you'd like to play this webinar for somebody else, it'll be available up on the satorisoftware.com website later this afternoon. After this, my number one priority is getting it posted up there. Now, this is very important, and those of you who have joined us for previous webinars will recognize this. We like to play Stump the Guests on the Satori webinars, and so the questions box on the right-hand side of your screen is important. Please use that question box. There are no questions too big or too small for our cast of characters here in the studio, and so enter them in there. We'll make sure that those get answered. If for some reason you do manage to stump our guests, we will follow up behind the scenes with the answer to your question. Finally, this webinar is scheduled to last just about 60 minutes or thereabouts. Now, myself, Liz, and Kim in the room, that could be a lot of words. So just a heads up that if we start to run over, we do want to be respectful of your time. Feel free to drop off. We will post the recording up on the satorisoftware.com website, and from there you can pick up where you left off, just in case we do use a whole lot of words. And Liz is shaking her head. I think she has many words planned. This is an exciting subject. All right, so who specifically are we talking about here? Today we actually have, well, what an interesting cast. We have Liz Daling, and Liz is the Senior Director of Marketing here at Satori Software. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you.
Good to have you aboard. And, of course, a regular here in the studio, Kim Mock. Kim, how the heck are you?
Happy Wednesday.
Senior Director, Senior Product Manager.
Right.
And you are the product owner for all kinds of stuff here at Satori.
Right.
We've had you in the studio. You've talked about, you have expertise far-reaching, and you're going to be color commentary today. Yep. Liz is going to be talking about something really cool, and you're going to help us interpret it, which is important because Liz hasn't let me see the slides in advance.
It'll be fun.
My name's Rob Perrin, and I'm the Director of Multimedia Marketing for Satori Software, and I will be your host today. I do want to throw out here, this is actually one of my favorite things in the whole world because we've got something kind of cool here. As I mentioned, Liz did not let me see the slides in advance. This is about my favorite thing in the whole world because we have something fun. We have something cool. We have people who are enthusiastic here in the room, and I get to learn right along with you how these things are going to work. So this is just about the perfect case. I also really like that this webinar was sent out to a smaller audience. It's a very intimate group. So that means that questions are all going to get answered for anybody who puts them in. I want to make sure those end up in here. This was not some mass firing with thousands of people tuning in. This is a much smaller group. So just a heads up. Intimate audience, we want to make sure everybody gets answered because I'm going to have a lot of fun with this one. I am excited about this. This is a product that I look at and I go, I could actually use that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And Liz is going to take things away with, well, quite possibly the most complicated slide we've ever had in the Satori studio.
Well, first of all, as you know, we're talking really about what role data plays for retailers. And a lot of that data, whether you be a small independent retailer or whether you're running a franchise operation connected to a bigger parent, the idea is that you are regularly looking at your customers and understanding more about those customers in order to deliver a better experience and at the end of the day, grow your business. So when we consider the different types of retailers that are out there, a lot of the large big box retailers have access to whole different types of software packages and things that they do in terms of data manipulations and the like. But what we're really focusing on today is what exists for the small independent retailer or the franchisee owner and what we can do in terms of understanding the customer data that's available and how we can enhance and kind of grow that data set into something that is truly meaningful for the business. So, from that perspective, we've talked to a lot of retailers whose use cases and forms of data collection are numerous. And we've seen things like everything from the sign up, sign your email at the front counter to the brand ambassadors that are running outside of the gym, chasing you down with a quick offer to, join today for $5. So if any of the things on screen look familiar to you, these are really very common methods of data collection for that small retail audience. So everything from sign up sheets in an event, if you go to trade shows or fairs that are specific to your offerings and promoting those goods, or holiday shows, things like that, you could be collecting just handwritten information from customers and prospects who would be good, future business for you. The other place is, potentially using coupons and redemption methods, referrals, word of mouth. The types of business that you're trying to grow oftentimes can come from good customers telling other people that they should be shopping at your location as well. So a number of different mechanisms in terms of ways to collect customer information today. So if these look familiar, you're talking to the right audience. So the big question, I think, especially for a lot of the small independent retailers that we've spoken to, are really what's stopping you from growing your business? How can you expand the customer base that you have today into net new customers and bigger share of wallet with those customers? A number of issues come to mind in terms of preventing that growth. So whether it is you don't have a formal marketing department and have just opened up a new retail outlet, or you're collecting data in, let's just say, all of the methods that we looked at previously and not one in particular, you have all of these sets of information but don't have the time or energy to maintain lists, because after all, your goal is to grow your business and to sell more of the products or services that you offer as a retailer, and to really then find other customers who will help you become more and more successful. The other barrier that we've seen is really just a lack of information. I don't know where to start. I've just gotten into this business. I've opened up this small gift shop. I'm trying to expand. I've invested a lot of money in building this store and finding the right location. Now what? So the now what is very much an opportunity for us to explore.
Managing data is very daunting. How many businesses do you think have a clipboard where people sign up for a mailing list or something similar where they're getting customer data in, but then there's no effective way? First off, you have to have a staff member sit down and manually enter that, and that's expensive. It's hardly your priority when you've got paying customers standing in front of them. How much data do you think is actually lost? How many businesses lose data simply because they have a hard time getting their arms around it?
Oh, I think there's a huge amount. One recent example of a small retailer that we had spoken to is actually a small kind of boutique apparel retailer who had the sign-up sheet at the counter.
Okay.
Everybody's filling out their name, address, email, put you on our mailing list. We'll grow that information. And what they were actually doing was they were bringing in college kids, right? Sort of recruiting, their kids' friends and whoever was available to come in the door and basically type up the data that was handwritten on those sheets. So from that perspective, not only is there probably missed information, because who knows, one of the sheets slipped out and ended up in the garbage, at the end of the night cleanup, but it's also the fact that how is that data then being maintained? So say they do get it into whatever customer database or Excel sheet, right? Whatever that store is using to collect that information, there's still not the visibility into the completeness or the accuracy of the data as entered. Can you read, ask this question to the two of you, can you read everything, somebody hand writes on a little piece of paper?
I can't read my own handwriting, let alone Kim's.
That's true. Yep.
So perfect example, right?
Data, it's interesting because there's an upfront cost to managing that data, to getting it into your system, whatever it is, as you mentioned, Excel, or if you happen to be using a database. There's an upfront cost to transferring that data in, but there's a hidden cost to not transferring it in. And it's really easy to look at that and say, oh, well, that upfront cost this is really expensive, and then not realize the fact that you're missing out on potential customers at that point.
And the question really is looking a little ahead of the immediate cost,
Right.
and saying, okay, what impact is this going to have on my business down the line? If I don't pay attention to the customers that I have, where I'm located, am I growing my business, the impact, it's going to play itself out in a very short period of time.
Sure.
So the ability to collect that information, manage it carefully, keep it accurate and up to date, all it does is tighten that relationship between the existing customers that you have and those customers that you want to establish a better relationship with. So the investment, sure, there is an investment to be made.
But you can't afford not to make
you
that
can't.
investment.
The risk is too great. And that's really what presents itself, is that the down the line risk of not taking control of any of this information or trying to capture any of this information, it will have a business impact.
Got it.
And as you rely on each and every individual customer purchase, that impact becomes greater and greater as you potentially lose customers because you haven't engaged with
And
them.
it's funny because you don't know which of those records is going to be the big spender.
Absolutely.
It could be
Or
the
refer.
one, or the referrer to
Yeah.
the big spender. So, that one that the intern misread or got wrong, that could have been the
or
one.
dropped on the floor.
Yeah,
Yep.
oops.
Yeah, absolutely. So interestingly enough, when you talk about kind of what the impact can be and things like that, we look at a lot of trends in various industries. And what do those trends tell us about either the increase in adoption or the reduction of use? And one of the things that we found recently was actually a retail trends forecast that truly talked about, in this industry particularly, that data will be more accessible and powerful. And actually that clear-cut expectation of that use of data and analytics growing within this very space. So one of the things that, data is sort of thought about, one of those things that you collect and it just sits and you're collecting piles of it and it's good to have, but how do I use it? Here's a perfect example of how to use it. Getting to know your customers and providing them customized shopping experiences. Something as simple as where you've decided to place your store location gives you access to a huge amount of data in the surrounding areas that then allows you to offer more targeted promotions and more effective communications to the audiences upon which your business will rely.
And it's kind of interesting because every time I open up Forbes magazine or any type of an entrepreneur related article, it's always talking about big data, big data, big data. And when you start looking at it, it gets to be really daunting because there are so many solutions that are really expensive and really hard to learn and implement. But I think that anybody who has a retail shop is an entrepreneur in their own right, and they're wanting to succeed for themselves. And being able to access the abilities of big data without the overhead of having to implement some huge Oracle database or what have you can be something that's really powerful and have a real impact on your business.
It's really a scope problem, isn't it? As a small business, you have all the problems that a big business has. It's just that you have fewer records that you're dealing with, or potentially fewer records. But all the problems are still there. You still have to manage to keep those records fresh. You still have to manage to keep those records sorted. You need to be able to target your customers appropriately. So you have all of the problems that these multi-million-dollar conglomerates have. It's just on a slightly smaller scale. So same management problems.
Yep.
Well, and it truly does go back to some of those questions that we asked up front. Does it then reduce you, because some of those concepts are so overwhelming and so big and so broad, does it almost put you in a situation of paralysis?
Sure.
And saying that, okay, I don't know where to start. I'm not sure how to get into this. So what we'll talk about today is just some basic concepts related to customer data that can give you that lift, give you that insight, and kind of help step you through the process.
Sure.
And the other thing to realize is, kind of to your point, Rob, is that it's as complicated as you choose to make it. So step one, collect the information about your customers. Step 2, maintain it and maintain its accuracy. Step 3, okay, what do you want to learn beyond that? How do you want to expand into other spaces? And one of the things that we really don't want to forget is that there is a significant impact on bad customer data.
Mm-hmm.
So say you collect data and it just either lies dormant, it doesn't get maintained, it's inaccurate, you've never kind of addressed that issue. A lot of the places that will manifest are in, say, sales, events, promotions aren't received in a timely manner. There's nothing worse than a retailer spending good dollars on creating this incredible seasonal promotion or time-sensitive promotion. We're going to take this holiday weekend and this is going to be huge and we have goals to sell these products and this is what we're going to target. So we're going to make an investment. And the worst thing possible is that those communications don't show up until the Tuesday after. Missed opportunity, right? I mean, end of the day, you look bad.
You're scaring me here.
Well, it's the reality, right? So the risk that you do run by not kind of taking hold of your customer data as an advantage and leveraging it is really missing those opportunities, losing customers, because, for example, everybody has a huge amount of shopping options, right? They can walk into their local retailer, they can walk into their mass chain store, they can go online. So the idea of customer loyalty has really evolved. And that idea inherently contains that you have a meaningful relationship with your customers. And if you don't stay in touch and you don't stay meaningful to your customers and you stop communicating with them, the reality is you've done something to damage that relationship. Similarly to the fact that customers now are choosing their brands, right? They get to choose where to shop quite easily.
I'm looking at all the designer clothing you're wearing.
Wow.
Here, so that's plainly the case. You've illustrated that.
And, but the thing is, too, people identify with different brands and they're sensitive to the messages that those brands send out. So all of a sudden, if I have this favorite local shop down the street and they start sending me postcards about an offering that's completely unrelated to my life and what I've purchased there and how I shop there, I'm going to start to disconnect. I'm going to start to say, okay, strangely enough, wow, I've spent a lot of my hard-earned money there. And
so the men's shoes ads are going to fall on deaf ears.
Probably going to pass on those. Yeah. Don't really have a use for those.
Well, something that occurred to me as you were talking there, I may be the best retailer in the world. I may run a fantastic shop that people love to come into. They love to engage. It's my staff. I have a great collection of well-targeted items that are in the store. But that doesn't necessarily make me good at handling data. So I could be missing out on a huge opportunity, maybe half my customers, maybe more than half my customers if I'm not. It doesn't matter how good my experience is. If I can't physically drag them in the door, how am I going to reach them? And that's what you're speaking to.
Yeah. And a lot of it does have to do with that consistency of experience, right? So when somebody comes into your shop, they have a certain feeling. They've either had great conversations with the staff that's there, they've seen products that they want to, look at and love and things like that. You want to stretch that outside of the store. How do you ensure that your business stays top of mind? How do you ensure that when you get new products in the door, that it's not just a happenstance, oh, I was passing by, so I stopped in, but you stay relevant, you stay top of mind. And if those experiences end up being dramatically different between the in-store experience and the at-home experience, you've again created some dissonance, which then puts that customer relationship at risk. And the thing as a small business today, I think everybody would agree to, is that there is nothing as a business owner you would want to introduce that introduces more risk.
There's not much margin for error.
Not at all. Not at all. So really the question becomes a quite simple one. You have customers. Customers have data. But do you have data on your customers? And what do you know about them? What do you want to know about them? And that's really where we start to look at where customer data can have an impact on a retail business. So if you think about it, Whether somebody comes and shops in a store and they say, oh, actually, I'll be at my home in a different location. Could you ship this purchase there? And delivery information, right? That's one angle on customer data. Targeted promotions we've talked about, whether it be date specific or event specific, you want to make sure that these investments that you're making in growing your business and in promoting the goods and services that you want to offer, that you have a hold, that timing is perfect, right? That you've allowed people the time to get ahead of their decision making process. You've given them a reason to walk in the door. And a lot of that does go back to a lot of the small retailers that we've talked to not really having a formalized marketing department. But truly, in just thinking about it, where are your customers, right? How close to your store are they? Can they walk in the door on Tuesday if they don't receive something until Monday? How are you communicating and how are you getting your message out there? And the other thing is events. A lot of small retailers are trying to bring people in their doors in a number of different ways. So if you're a salon that's doing, free makeup applications for X period of time to get people in to be aware of your services menu that you offer, great. If you're a boutique, apparel retailer that's hosting a wine tasting in order to get people into your store and then look at the goods that are hanging on the wall, another great example of how you can really use events to drive the exposure inside of your walls. So one of the things that we've talked about and that you alluded to earlier, Rob, is really the fact that no matter what the size of your retail establishment, if you are a Morton Steakhouse, national chain, you still have some of the same challenges. So if you look at the challenge of keeping loyal customers engaged and interacting with brands and trying to come up with new ways to segment guests so they have the right message to the right person, and I would add the component of at the right time, in the right location, it's the same issue. And so it really does have a direct impact on the success of those businesses to maintain their customer relationships and build upon them. And once you find that customer group that's most appealing to you and helping your business drive towards success, you really do have the opportunity then to find more customers like that. The more you know, you'll be better able to grow your business and to expand your business into areas with targeted customers that are similar.
Okay, you're scaring me. Solve my problem.
All right. Well, what we'll take a look at now is actually a solution. Right. So for those small retailers, we won't go into the high, scary world of, predictive analytics and things like that.
You're not even going to say big data, are you?
No.
Because Kim will run screaming from the room if you say big data.
I've left that in your hands and Kim's capable hands to address if you would like. I will not say that word. How about it?
Okay.
Nope.
It's a deal.
Yeah. No. What we'll talk about is really important. It's your data as a retailer. It doesn't matter. Yes, there are massive sets of data in the world. See, I didn't say big. However, your data is what's important to you, right? Your data is what's meaningful to growing your business.
And it's pretty much your biggest asset as a company, because the data that you have on your customers, that really represents your customer, and the way that you're able to communicate with them is really your biggest leverage to really take it up to the next level.
So by data, you just don't mean name and address. This could mean more than that. This could mean purchase history. This could mean habits, could mean
email addresses, all the social media interactions that you've had. It's a lot of different touch points, and it really depends on the business what that data is, right? You're going to have a different set of data if you are a specialized car dealership versus an apparel store. You're going to have a totally different view on your customers, and so it's really specialized to your specific business.
And so now you guys you're edging in, right? You're going to that big world again. So what we're going to take a look at here is actually some of the core components that really do get back to some of the fundamental components of your customer data that are going to be important to you as a small retailer. So it comes down to some of the basics, right? Where do my customers live? Where do they work, right? So completing, correcting, verifying those addresses becomes a core component.
Well, it doesn't matter that I happen to have your shoe size in my database if I don't know your address correctly. If I can't get my material to you, it does no good for me to advertise men's shoes to you.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And so
gotcha.
that's why we've kind of taken it back,
Gotcha.
right? Let's talk about some of those
Get the
foundational
basics
data
right
elements
first.
and then look to expand, right? I mean,
Okay.
this is kind of that level of data that should be regularly maintained and monitored within the walls of your business. And there are easy ways to do it. And we'll kind of look at some of the solutions too that we have and kind of give you some of those data translations and how they're relevant to a retailer. So really, it is keeping those records up to date because the worst thing you can do, as we've discussed, is create that bad customer experience or completely disconnect. So if you don't keep that information up to date, your customers move, right? You don't know how to stay in touch with them. So we'll talk about some specific data services that help us keep a better handle on those issues that we're presenting here. The other thing too, and I think Kim has actually a recent personal example of this, but it really is, maintaining consolidated customer lists so that you're not inadvertently, let's use that word, communicating with the same customer multiple times.
Or even in different ways. So, as Liz said, I kind of had a recent example of this. I'd signed up to be an email subscriber to a local small boutique, and so I get periodic emails saying, "Hey, I've got this thing for sale," or we're working on this event or something like that. And somehow I got entered into their database twice. And this is just for email updates. So they send out a newsletter, and so it's really been interesting because I actually get two emails from them every single time they send out an email. And they must have split their list because they're trying to avoid spam blockers or something. But I get an email, and then 10 to 30 minutes later, I get that same email again. And so every single time I get an email from them, even though I value the service that they're offering, I get that little bit of doubt of, okay, do they really pay attention? Is there something else going on there? Or do they really have everything together?
And do they really know you, right? Or are
Mm-hmm.
you just a name on a list?
Yeah. And do they care about that number?
So, a number of issues kind of bubble up when you look at things like that because of a lot of the things we've talked about earlier, right? Customers being able to choose who they do business with. So the other thing too that Rob alluded to, and we're going to kind of, take that couple steps back from, is really what else do you want to know? What other information would you like to add to that customer data that you've collected already? So one of the solutions that we have at Satori to kind of leverage the data services that are out there, but in an easily consumed way, is a solution called Satori Infuse Desktop. And that's what you're looking at here. So, from a really focused kind of customer data quality approach, you can see the menu of items. And there are a number of those from address correction to following those moves to eliminating duplicates. And highlighted here, those data services, really adding more to the data that you do today that you can leverage in one interface. The idea being that you can start where you're comfortable and then grow from there. So if what you're looking to do in pass one is to take all of that data from all of those handwritten sign up forms and get it into a file and run that through address correction and say, okay, now I've checked this against, USPS database of all of the addresses that are registered there, and I now know that these are correct and that I can find these people. Pass one.
Mm-hmm.
If you then want to expand on that and look at things like extended change of address, which actually sources from different avenues, we'll take a look at how that can be impactful to a retailer. And as you can see, the list grows. So really where you choose to take this and the level of data services that you choose to apply to your customer data becomes pretty broad. And you'll learn more and more through each one of those applications.
So this seems like the phrase a no-brainer. Your customer moves, you still want to continue to market to them. how do people who don't have this service keep up? They count on the customers then to inform them that they've moved?
Well, sometimes, and then other times, if you have, say, a mail house. So if you send out postcards or something like that, you would rely on the mail house to run that for you. But then the problem is usually you don't get that data back,
Right.
or if you do, it's really hard to merge it back in.
Because this just seems common sense. I was looking at the list here of the data services that you're describing, and the address correction, the ECOA thing looks great. But then I look at the suppression suite. If I'm going to spend money on sending something out, I certainly don't want to send it. Even the examples you use here, if somebody's on a do not mail list, we were talking about how well do they know you. If they've taken the time to put themselves on a do not mail list, I'm not making any friends by mailing them at that point. I know how I feel when my phone rings and I'm on the do not call list. The deceased persons, that's a pointless mailing, not to mention the fact that it can be disturbing to those who are still here. And the correctional facility, well, quite frankly, they're not going to stop into my boutique anytime in the near future. So.
Right. And the other thing, to Kim's point, even if you are outsourcing some of those services, the reality is with that outsourcing, you are relying on that vendor to run through these processes for you.
But they're only doing it on my mail. If I want to be able to have my customer list, so for in-house.
Exactly. And so to Kim's point, that not coming back to you is an issue, right? Because then your customer data still stays muddy and outdated and not current and hasn't really done anything to leverage your ability to connect one-on-one. Mm-hmm. At the same time, what you've done, if you don't take hold of this for yourself, is you're potentially incurring greater costs outside of your business than you may be aware of, or than you may need to.
Well, and I'm misleading myself. I might think I have more customers in my database than I actually do because some have moved. I can't reach them. Some of them are in correctional facilities. So at that point, I may have a false view of how successful my business is, what my potential customer base is.
Absolutely.
That's terrible.
Mm-hmm. So what we'll do is we'll kind of take a quick look at the whys. We've sort of alluded to a number of these, but here are some points to really consider because the impact of this customer data or the incorrectness in certain cases of that customer data does have a direct impact on your business and your ability to grow your business. Because think about it from the perspective as well, that if you're basing all of your decisions on a whole set of bad information, the next step you take is going to be equally flawed. So if you think about things like change of address and the simple question of why does that even matter to me, look at the fact that on average, people move 11.7 times in their lifetime. Rob's question about if they move, where do you find them? You've lost 11.7 times. And especially if your target profile is in, let's say, the college age range. Good luck, right? You're a retailer who relies on that younger, college to early professional, kind of adulthood audience. You've got a lot of moves in a short period of time.
And a lot of them are a little more inconsistent about how they report those moves. So one of the things that's kind of important to note is, especially if you're relying on a mail house to update your addresses for you, they usually only use the data that's available from the USPS. So that means that they're going to have to go to USPS.com and fill things out, enter their credit card, and there's this whole process, right? But
you just jarred a memory for me. I can remember filling out a card and giving it to the post office to tell them my old address and my new address. But actually, I don't think I've done that in the last 3 or 4 moves that I've made.
Well, and a lot of people don't anymore because when you move,
it got lost in the process, and I haven't even thought about it.
The post office anymore. You don't think about. You're thinking about, okay, where are the schools? Where's my local grocery store? You're not thinking about how do I forward my mail. Because people aren't as reliable at checking it.
Even when it came down to mail, I think I just contacted the magazine and said, "Here's my new address." This is terrible. I didn't even think about going to the post office.
And the younger demographic is definitely trending that way. I know my nephews who are in their 20s. they don't think about the post office. They update their LinkedIn profile more than than they probably check their mailbox these days. And so it's really unreliable for them to submit that to the post office. So using your mail service provider, your mail house to do that for you, you're actually missing out on a lot of extra data.
So I guess, I'll just gloss over bullet 2 there, right? Where we've had now multiple examples of the fact that, yes, there are traditional methods of updating your address. However, the reality is not everyone uses them.
I'm guilty.
And yes, I think we've established 3 or 4 moves where you may be guilty. And the truth of the matter is, and Rob alluded to this as well, but you were sure to update that magazine subscription that you really want in hand.
I'm paying for that. So yes, that.
So the reality is there are numerous data sources out there available in the marketplace, and those can be consumed through a service that you saw in the previous slide called ECOA, which is actually extended change of address. And so why not take advantage of the tools that are out there to make sure that that valuable customer data you have is maintained and is corrected? When you look at things like Apartment Append, another service available through Satori Infuse Desktop, you can look at the fact that, again, it's a truing up of the cost that you're spending. If you're sending out postcards to those target customers and prospects in your neighborhood, or, that are within whatever radius of your store location, why not take the time to ensure that you can actually reach every residence that you intend to, instead of, as I've seen, in different apartment buildings when you walk in, near the mailroom and things like that, the stack of generics, right, that sit on the counter.
Well, Kim, you're a postal expert. What is the policy? If I send something to an apartment building and it's got a name on it but no apartment number, what's the post office do with it?
So actually what'll happen is the post office, some carriers will go the extra mile, but they've actually told carriers that they're not required to do that. So if they know that John Doe lives in apartment B, then maybe they'll put it in the apartment B mailbox, maybe they won't. And as the post office is kind of shrinking a little bit and they're changing things up, the carriers just don't have that knowledge anymore of who lives in what apartment. So, and the thing is this kind of goes back to the change of address thing as well. If you're sending out standard mail, they're not going to forward it. So if you are, even if they were to forward it, you would get that ugly yellow sticker and it would arrive about, at least a week late,
yeah.
right? But they're not going to forward standard mail. It's just going to go right in the recycle bin.
Bob Shimmick, our Senior Director of Postal Affairs, brought up a statistic during his news program last week where he was saying that due to turnover in the post office, something like almost 20% of the mail carriers, letter carriers, are currently with the USPS or have been with the USPS less than a year right now. That's how dramatic their turnover is. So, yeah, I remember when I was a kid, we had the same post guy. His name was Kermit. We used to talk to him out there at the mailbox for years, but you're right. That doesn't happen anymore, does it?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
And mail is one aspect of it, right? So we've talked a lot about that just in terms of, postcard mailings or promotional mailings that a small retailer would typically do. The other way to look at it is almost from a customer segmentation approach, right? Because if I have that level of detail about my customers, why couldn't I then offer a specific promotion to them? A close-out apartment sale, right? Looking to refresh your apartment for spring or fall or whatever the season may be, that actually is something that you can then build in and target accordingly. What if you have a whole new line of products, say if you're a home goods store that has a smaller footprint than was previously available? Wouldn't that be something applicable to those customers of yours who live in, apartments or different types of residencies?
I've seen this. That company that you can buy and assemble your own furniture, they actually target their mailings based upon whether you're in a house or an apartment. So I have seen this in action.
And there's your example, right? So a number of creative ways, regardless of what your distribution method.
Cool.
But,
I always wondered how they did that.
Yeah, leveraging that information for sure. So, we did talk briefly about things like Suppression Suite, and the reality is that you are spending your precious dollars on trying to grow your business. And if you look at the fact of spending those dollars well and getting the value out of every dollar you spend, there really isn't any point in wasting those dollars on people that you can't reach.
Nobody's got money to throw away anymore.
Nobody does. And the other thing is, and you alluded to this before, some of those are sensitive subjects, whether it is a deceased person or an incarcerated person, things like that. Those are also risks that you introduce by potentially mistargeting something to those customers, and you break that loyalty. And again, that we know that those customers, they choose where to shop, right? They choose who to do business with. And so that becomes a big contributing factor there. And also the flip side of that is then building that confidence, right? That them. It's Kim's example in reverse, ensure that they see me as a person and that they know, about me, and that their messaging is relevant and things like that. And that's complemented by things like head of household, where you can increase the personalization of the communications that you're sending, or better target that message by knowing more about your prospects and customers, right? It goes back to the fact that, Rob mentioned at the beginning of the show, am I going to be very motivated by a promotion of men's shoes? No. Now, women's shoes, on the other hand, we've got a whole different level of interest.
Yeah, those are designer shoes, aren't they, Liz? Okay.
Yes. So
proof is in the pudding.
At the end of the day, the real focus here is that as a retailer, you have a huge opportunity in front of you to connect well and to track and to know those customers and that you have and value, increase the frequency of purchase and the things that they buy from you, but also find more customers like them, right? And what that does is it builds your business. It builds your revenue, people come visit more, and there's a heightened level of awareness. And especially as a local independent retailer or, a small business connected to a larger entity, the first and best pass you have is connecting with those customers, creating some good word of mouth, ensuring that you keep up with them and maintain those relationships in order to then grow your business.
Not being a retailer, I guess some of these nuances never occurred to me, but I look at it, this just seems common sense. It's competitive. I've got a shop next door to me. Anything that I can do to better communicate with my customers, to better target my customers for the things that I'm trying to sell, to save money on printing, on mailing, on delivery, to make sure this all seems common sense. This isn't an edge. This is a requirement.
It's a requirement, but it takes a little bit of this type of dissection, right? Because as we said earlier, that this can be a very overwhelming task. What's important to realize is that there are simple desktop softwares that you can easily install, leveraging the services that mean the most to your customers in the back end, and that you can start where your business requires. That it's not some big, overwhelming, all-encompassing solution or challenge, or I'm going to get this software package that I don't even know what to do with. You saw the interface, right? You start where you need to start. And that first point is often addressed, and it's basic information about your customers to ensure that you can stay in touch. So it really is kind of breaking down the barriers, explaining some of those services that are available, because as we said earlier, your focus is on getting more customers and growing your retail business that you've made the investment in and upon which you rely for livelihood.
Okay, so I can't afford to not do this. What do I do?
So, as you can see on the screen in front of you, the next steps would be to get in touch, and we can talk you through a number of the solutions that are available and how to best leverage those services. You see the 800 number on the screen, as well as an email to sales@satorisoftware.com. And really what we can do is start to talk very specifically about the challenges that you face and the things that we have or the services that we have available that you could take advantage of very quickly.
Most of the questions have been answered as they've come in. I've been inserting them in here, but one that always comes up at this is affordability. What's this look like? I'm a small business. We're addressing small businesses here. can we've said the obvious. I can't afford not to do this, but can I afford to do this?
You can absolutely afford to do this. And I think as a small retailer, you can look at things in a number of ways. The introductory cost of the solution is very palatable and it can expand as your needs expand. If you're working with a smaller set of customers, the investment will look different than if you already have a huge amount of customers for which that data would need to be maintained. So I would encourage the dialogue. And I think what you'll find is for a lot of small retailers that initial investment the ROI on that initial investment will come back quickly. And it'll come back with a handful of customers and the value of their purchases.
As Kim can attest, we always get this question when we do a webinar, and there's a certain barrier to entry here. If I call this phone number, it's going to ring through, and I can see that the email says sales in it. If I call, they're going to try to sell me something, aren't they? They're going to try to sell me something I don't need. They're going to put me in the high-end package that's really expensive. And Kim and I have addressed this on a number of different levels, but the fact of the matter is our salespeople are not like that.
They really aren't. And what they're going to end up talking to you about are the specific requirements that you have. What are you looking to do? Right? If you are looking at this business opportunity of kind of collecting and correcting the information that you have about your customers, what elements are most important to you? And what they will then do is they will right size a solution for you. The nice thing about a company like Satori is that we have a variety of solutions, from the simple, easy to use, desktop solutions to much more advanced solutions. So the reality is you'll have a nice conversation about what your business requirements are. And based on that, they'll advise and recommend a solution that's fit for that application. It really is that simple.
And it's real people here too at Satori, isn't it? It's not, I can walk right down the hallway and walk into the president's office and chat with him. It's not a big, giant, scary conglomerate, scary thing. You can actually talk to real people. Liz is a real person. Kim, another real person.
That's right.
Now, what about technical? Okay. So data scares me. If you told me right now that, so for example, my hard drive, I'm a pack rat. I save stuff. I put it off. I don't have good data structured. I don't put things in folders. All right. But if you told me right now that I needed to go clean up my hard drive, I think I'd rather, well, there's a number of things I'd rather do that are probably not arable. But the fact of the matter is that there's a technical barrier to entry here. How scary is this really? I mean, we talked about the complexity of the data, but what happens? I'm a retail guy.
It's as scary as taking a list that you have with customer information on it and uploading it to the software.
Yeah. And the software really walks you through each of those processes. So it's actually really designed with the basic user in mind. So if you're not a computer person, if you're going and doing the big data things scare you, if writing a SQL query is not something that's on your resume.
I don't even know what that is.
I work with the developers a lot, so I pick up these buzzwords. But if anything like that is something that's daunting, that's not something that you're going to see inside of the products that we have for you.
Can I use this? I mean, you know me. Could I,
Yeah.
if you handed me this software and said, go to work, could I do it?
Yeah, so one of the nice things, especially about Satori Infuse Desktop, is it's very wizards based. So it basically walks you through each of the steps. If you want to do address correction, you click the button and it's going to walk you through, what do you want to do with this type of address? How do you want to format the address? And it's going to ask you the questions, and then it'll run the process for you and tell you when it's done.
By wizards, you mean it'll walk me through, not guys with pointy hats saying
exactly
that you shall not pass.
That's right. No wands required.
Okay. I was dating myself. I went with the Tolkien reference rather than the Harry Potter reference there. Kim's much younger. Where else can we go with this? I mean, this sounds like, as I said, it's common sense. This is something that you've got me excited now. What else am I missing, Kim? You own so many products here at Satori that this sounds like a slam dunk. This is something that I'm going to get in. How is it going to grow with my business? Where can I go with this?
So the interesting thing is you start where you're at.
Okay.
So I really liked Liz's example of kind of the 3 steps. So first, getting your data and making sure that it's correct and formatted and kind of uniform, that's really the first step. And then making sure it's up to date, maintaining, getting into kind of a cadence of maintaining that data is really important, because every month you've probably got somebody on your
Somebody
list
moves.
that's going to move, or they'll get married, or something will happen. They're going to have some type of a life event, and keeping up to date on that is really important for keeping in touch with those customers. And then you can kind of start branching out, and that's the nice thing with Satori Infuse Desktop, and also with our sales department. They're going to start with you where you're at, and then as you're ready to grow more, then the solution can grow with you.
And the nice thing that I would add to it too is that all through that same interface, you can leverage a number of different data services. So as your level of information requirements increases, you still use the same point of access to get more information, right? You can pick different data sets. You can leverage them because they're available behind the scenes. So it does reduce a lot of the intimidation and a lot of the hesitation by just the fact that you are uploading lists and you are choosing what to do with them. And so it is quite simple. Even I could use this.
Probably far better suited to it than I am, Liz. This will grow with me, but on the flip side of that, I can grow with it. So it sounds like this is something that will enable me to grow my business. So this makes me better at marketing my business.
Yeah, and as you get better at marketing, your customer list will grow, your revenue will grow, and you'll do better as a business.
How cool is that? So on behalf of everyone here at Satori Software, I would like to thank our presenters for showing up today. I'd like to say special thanks to Liz Daling, our Senior Director of Marketing. Liz, good to have you on board.
A pleasure to be here.
This wasn't near as scary as you thought it was going to be, was it?
I survived.
And Kim Mock, Senior Product Manager and a regular here in the Satori studio. Always good to have you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for joining us. To everyone who tuned in today, you will be presented with a brief survey at the close of this webinar, and we'd really love to have you fill that out. That's how we decide the sort of subjects that are going to be interesting to you, and that's how we improve these webinars. And we really do want to make sure that these are focused on what you want to hear about. So please fill out that survey for us. As I mentioned, this webinar will be available in its entirety on the webinar section of satorisoftware.com. It is my privilege to go post it this afternoon, so I'm looking forward to doing that. For Satori Software, I'm Rob Perrin. I'm the Director of Multimedia Marketing, and we appreciate your tuning in.